Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book and author and indie bookstore initiative that was started the day of lockdown to help authors, bookstores, and readers who want to connect with authors and authors who want to connect with readers. So today is really, really special. We have Courtney Sullivan here and her book, The Cliffs. I have to tell you that I've known Courtney for a lot of years. And the nice thing about this book is not only is the book fabulous, but Courtney is like the best person on the planet. She's really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And I'm so excited to talk to her. So a few housekeeping things before I talk about the book. If you have questions for Courtney, please put them in the chat and I will get to them. I promise I will. I just have questions I want to ask her myself. We at A Mighty Blaze love for you to go to indie booksellers. We make it easy for you. I've put the link to bookshop.org right in the chat, so you can just click on it. And not only can you buy The Cliffs, but you can buy every single other book of Courtney's that there is. And trust me, you're going to want to read all of them because they're incredible. So let me give you a little bio for Courtney, then I'll welcome you. Courtney Sullivan is the best-selling author of Commencement, Maine, The Engagements, Saints for All Occasions, and Friends and Strangers. Her work has been translated into 17 languages and has sold more than 1 million copies. More than 500,000 copies of Maine are in print still. Her book, The Cliffs, Ian Napolitano said, a stunning achievement and Courtney Sullivan's best book yet. I literally could not put this book down. And I actually agree with that. I was telling Courtney before that I was trying to read the book with an eye to questions, and I got so sucked into the plot, I finally had to give it up and just read the book. And then I went back to find the questions. The book is just incredible. It's a Today Show pick. It's been getting raves everywhere. It's this incredible multi-layered novel. It's about Shakers, Indigenous people, the patriarchy, women's lives, alcoholism, memory, spiritualism, and more. It starts with Jane Flanagan, who loses her job and husband in one day. She's a little too fond of alcohol. She returns to Maine and ends up helping a new owner of her house, Genevieve, figure out the history of the house, which reveals startling news about Jane's own past and about what women bequeath to other women through the generations. So I want to welcome Courtney. Courtney, thank you so much for being here to talk about your gorgeous book, The Cliffs.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for that amazing, kind introduction. I think you're the best person ever. And I love A Mighty Blaze. I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mighty Blaze is your Mighty Blaze from now on, now that you've been on. So there's a great inception story of how this book came about. You said the seed was planted, or you said it in the acknowledgement that it was planted 8 years ago. So it must be like 9 years ago.
Now it's probably 10 or even maybe 11.
Oh my God, tell us, because it's an incredible story.
So my husband and I were on vacation in Maine. Our children were not yet born. So it was just us and another couple, our friends Mike and Melissa. And we were driving around one day, and this is in the Ogunquit, Cape Nettic, southern Maine area. So that's a place I've gone every summer of my life. But we stumbled upon this house on a cliff over the water, absolutely gorgeous. I had somehow never seen it before. And it was fully furnished, a very old house, fully furnished down to pictures hanging on the walls, and there was a dollhouse in the corner. There were all these intriguing details, and the house was abandoned. And, for any of us who love a good haunted house mystery, whether it's, Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew or R.L. Stine, or frankly, my kids are really into watching the new Scooby-Doo, and I'm watching it and I'm like, a lot of these episodes are kind of like my novel. There's something irresistible about an abandoned home, especially one that's still full of so much stuff. It just made me immediately want to know who lived here and why did they leave and where did they go next. And so every summer we would go back. When we were in Maine, that was the first thing we would do, is go check out the house. And every summer it was sort of more in disrepair, but there was always a little surprise. Like one year, the rolling lawn down to the ocean had, it was always really overgrown. And then one year somebody had mowed the lawn, which was so weird. Like, who mowed the lawn and why? Just interesting. When one year someone had taken the appliances out of the kitchen, they were just gone. And so eventually we came one year and the house was gone. The house had been torn down.
Oh,
And in its place was the foundation for the grossest McMansion ever. It was so large that there is no longer a rolling lawn to the ocean because the house is so big, there's no lawn at all. And now the house is there. If you see it from a boat from the water, you would think it was a hotel. I mean, it's just enormous. But anyway, so that kind of was when things clicked into place, and I felt like I really want to write about that house. And the house came before any of the characters, which I've never had that happen before.
wow.
And I was writing out like what exactly was in the house. The banister had fallen in, and then there were marbles on the floor, and there was the dollhouse I mentioned, and the paintings, and all of those real details from that house ended up playing a part in the plot.
Wait, the marbles were real? Oh, that gives me a chill.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great. That's really, really great. There's so much about our connection to where we live and what a house does and the secret. It's almost like this book. I'm going to just show the gorgeous cover again. This book really made me feel that houses could be haunted, but not in the way you usually think with ghosts, more like energy from people sort of seeps down. Because a lot of times, like, don't you find that when you walk into apartments or houses, you feel a kind of energy, like you can feel like, oh, I feel so comfortable here, or oh no, I don't feel comfortable here.
Yes, I believe that completely. I am so interested, and maybe it's because you and I are both from New England, so it's like it's how we are, it's how we're made. But like that anything old, whether it be a house or an object, I remember, I just love it because I feel the life there.
Yeah, exactly.
Locket. I love antique jewelry. My husband once gave me a locket, and it was about 100 years old, and I just put it on, and I immediately was like, nope, got to return it. Bad jewelry.
Yes.
About it. And he was like, okay, because he's used to
I think it's true. And I think, if you want to I always like the science of sort of woo-woo stuff. Mm-hmm. And they say that a lot of times, when people say, oh, they've been reincarnated or whatever, it's cellular memory. The cells contain memories. So it's science, it's quantum physics, but it does. So why shouldn't houses?
Right.
Why shouldn't houses? I find that incredible, just incredible. There's also so much about our connection to nature, especially the connection among indigenous people, who I loved this one line where they gave parenthood to a river. And I thought that's really something to talk about. And there's also something to talk about Maine. Why Maine? What is your connection to Maine? Not just, that you visited there or it, but how does it make you feel in the land there? And do you feel the same things or different things about Boston? Do you feel a connection to Boston?
Yes. So I was raised outside of Boston, and I now live in my hometown again after 20 years in New York. And I'm sure that's a novel waiting to be written.
Wow.
All of my novels weirdly have these like self-fulfilling prophecies where I write the thing and then it happens. So in this book, Jane reluctantly moves to her hometown, and I ended up doing the same thing, but I'm quite happy to be in my hometown. But kind of to the surprise of my inner like goth 14-year-old who hated being here. It's weird. But
it's different.
And the other thing is this, this sort of, the book centers on this Victorian house, and with the plaque on the door with a man's name on it, and in the process of all of this, I actually moved into a Victorian house with a plaque on it with a man's name. And so it's weird. I tell you, my books, it's like they always predict where I'm headed in life. It's so funny. Why Maine? I mean, I think partly I think of New England as like one thing, I don't
Right,
necessarily
right.
versus Massachusetts, even though of course they're very different, and those from one state feel very different, about another. But um, I think, like Saints for All Occasions was very much centered around Boston and towns around
Mhm.
Boston. But Maine has always been my happy place. I love Maine. My mom loved a gunkwit, still loves a gunkwit, and brought us there every summer when we were kids. And now I bring my kids there. And so it's just such a part of my life. And I also just, I feel this sort of like I still have such great love for that area, but also I wanted to maybe just interrogate a few of the things that we have grown up taking as gospel, And so one of those things, and one of the reasons why this book centers on a house, is because that plaque on the door, that says the, what is his name? Samuel Littleton House. This is a man whose name is still on that house 200 years later, but he only ever spent maybe a month there.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
And so
That's
idea of like what gets recorded and what gets passed down versus what actually happened. And a lot
right.
of times what actually happened is what happened to not white men, but everyone else. And so
Right.
yeah, as you know, in New England, this whole issue of firsts is everywhere. Like, so in the town I live in, one of our many firsts that has a huge plaque on it is New England's first weather observatory. And that always makes me laugh because
Wow.
there were native people here for 10,000 years prior. And I'm
Right.
pretty sure observing the weather was a big part of what
That's
they did.
right. That's
So
right.
it's
That's right.
this sort of thing.
Absolutely. So the other thing that I absolutely loved about this book is the way you handled spiritualism. I just, as I said before, my whole take about all of that stuff is, I've spent thousands going to psychics and mediums and tarot cards and all this stuff. I totally believe in it, but I don't believe in it in a woo-woo way. It's always, for me, it's always a quantum physics take, which is the universe is stranger than we can imagine.
Yeah.
And we're all connected in some way. But and I also love the whole thing about Camp Mira. Is there such a place, or was it sort of based on Lilydale, the place where all the spiritualists go to? And did you go there?
There is so Lilydale, of course, is like a very popular, well, I mean, as popular as these places still are at this point. In the Civil War era, you had tens of thousands of people going to spiritualist camps all over the country every summer. And it was the Civil War. So you had so many people who had lost young men in their
Right.
families, and they wanted to believe that wasn't the end of their story. That couldn't be the end. And so spiritualism was booming. Mary Todd Lincoln famously had mediums living in the White House so that she could talk to her sons whenever she wanted to. And so now most of those spiritualist camps are gone. There are, as far as I know, there are 3 still going. I feel like Lilydale is going pretty strong. There's Florida, and then there's Camp Etna in Maine, which is what Camp Mira in the book is based on.
So you did go? You did go to? Oh my God, that's great! That's great! That's great! And what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts about it? I mean,
I think, well, I mean, from the sort of actual mediumship piece of it, I totally believe in all of that stuff too. I think I'm coming at it from a similar place as you are. I just feel like we don't know everything. It's
right.
sort of arrogant to think that we do, and there are just too many coincidences and too many whatever. But I also think not every person who says that they're a medium is truly
Right.
a medium, and that gives the whole field kind of a bad
reputation. Right. That's why it has a bad reputation sometimes.
Yes. But I do think, one of the reasons I got interested in mediums, I've always been, because my mom always loved psychics. The whole time I was a kid, she would have psychics over to give readings to all the women from the neighborhood.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yes, it was like a Tupperware party, but with a psychic instead. And it was great. So I'm not brand new to that world, but as I have reached, now I'm 43 years old, I have started to have friends lose their parents. And a thing I've seen happen several times is people who have no interest in any of this, no belief in any of this, who lose their parents or lose someone they love dearly, and they reach out to a medium because it's kind of like, well, maybe, they want to believe. And I think that wrestling with sort of like faith and doubt is such a huge part
Yes.
of
Yes.
the whole book, and that process.
I wanted to talk about Jane. I wrote down Jane truly believes in the power of stories, which she does. But I wanted to ask, doesn't she also believe in the power of belief?
Oh, yes. Yes, I love
Yeah.
that. So true. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought about that. I thought about because she does. It's kind of like it almost doesn't matter whether it's like 100% provable. It's like if you believe it is and it impacts you and it affects you, then it is for all accounts.
Right.
There's a lot about alcoholism. Jane's mother was one, Jane is one, and there's a line, you have to face something you did. You'll go under if you don't. And I feel like that really resonated as far as the histories that Jane is examining. And also, it's very sort of pertinent to today's political situation. Also, can you talk about that whole idea of facing down things and what happens when you don't?
Yeah. I think, I guess the positive, the silver lining of where we are right now today. I mean, it's hard to find a silver lining to where we are right now today.
Yeah.
But I will say that, Jane is an archivist. She works at the
Right.
Library
History.
in Harvard, which is a real place. And that is such an incredible place because they collect the archives of women, American women, all different kinds of women. And they're always striving to tell a fuller, more complete story of what it means to be an American woman and who falls into that category. And I'm seeing this in everything from the Museum of Natural History down to the Forbes House Museum in Milton, Mass, down the street from where I live, that all of these places are beginning to say, okay, like for example, the Forbes House, it's this old shipping family who made tons of money, these sea captains who made tons of money and built this beautiful house. When I was a kid, you could take a tour there and hear about how great they were at business. Now the tour also includes, well, they did benefit from the slave trade in the Caribbean, but it may not have been on their own property, but they benefited from that. And then another old home here in Milton is doing, not only can you tour the home and hear the lives of the family, but let's also talk about the lives of the servants who lived in this house and what was that like. And so telling just a bigger story and casting a wider net for who's allowed to tell their story, which I feel like is a positive in these otherwise very dark times. Because if we do not understand our history, of course, we are doomed to repeat it. And this is part of it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. In Massachusetts, like where I live, we grew up with so many streets and bodies of water and whatever named after Native American tribes and people. But always the story was kind of like, they were so kind, they were so wonderful, they shared their information with us, and then they kindly left. And clearly that is not what
Right. That's not the story. That's not the story.
And so, and a huge part of it is they kindly left. Well, they didn't leave. They're still here. And there's still this ongoing fight for sovereignty and all of that. So I think for Jane, she's very used to studying other people's history. But in the course of this book, she's kind of forced to learn more about her own family history and her own personal history, as well as local history of where she's from. And as for the drinking, I think that's something that she knows, it's one of those things. It's like the voice has to get louder and louder until you hear it, right? So she knows,
That's right.
and I'm 8 years sober, so I'm writing what I know. She's always sort of judged her mother for drinking, then her sister for drinking. She doesn't see her own drinking as similar because she's able to kind of like partition her life off so that it never interferes with these other parts of her life in which she's very high functioning, in her job, in her marriage. But then eventually it catches up with you, and this question of, well, I'm doing it better, or I can hide this. She has to face it. And I wanted her I feel bad for making her go through this, but I wanted her in the book to not have it settled at all, to not have.
No, I love that it wasn't settled.
Yeah. Like she isn't even really willing. She's kind of like, okay, if my husband will take me back and, I can get my job back and all of these things. She's not necessarily saying I don't drink anymore, but she's kind of putting it on hold, and not really facing reality until once again she's forced to do so.
Well, Jane also had another wonderful question that I wrote down, which was, how do we learn how to see? And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting question, because people tend to, if you've been told to view something a certain way, that's how you see it. Like if you haven't been taught that we stole land from indigenous people, then you are not necessarily going to see it as bad. But through this, when you start to hear the stories, you learn to see it differently. I wonder if you could add to that.
Well, I think the other thing is that once that starts, you just start seeing it everywhere you look. Like we have I think throughout Massachusetts in 1930, there was just a boom in that time period. There was a boom in antiquarian societies, historical societies. That was just like a very trendy thing at that time. And a lot of money was put into making these beautiful signs that are now antiques that are all over the place. There's literally one in Milton that's still standing. And I don't know if I ever read it until I started thinking about these things in the last couple of years. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's there. And it literally says, on this land, the Ponset people, kindly stepped aside so that the settlers.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we have new signage too. We have more up-to-date signage, but that is still there. And actually, I don't know, this is controversial, but I like that it is still there, because I like seeing, we have a wonderful, oh my gosh, I volunteer in the school library in town every week. This is a major diversion, sorry. But I'm getting so many.
I like diversions.
Our school librarian is like an absolute genius, and I love him so much. And at some point, he went through this really arduous process of pulling out every book that was full of racist, sexist, whatever, ableist stereotypes. But because there are a lot, because school libraries are full of books, that are 50 years old. So, but he didn't get rid of them. He said, no, I'm going to use these to teach. I'm using these to teach kids. How did we talk about girls versus boys in 1960 versus how we talk about that now?
Right.
It's mind blowing for the kids. And it's so good for them to see that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you can't know your present or your future if you don't know the reality of what really happened in the past. Yeah. And if you don't know the stories of the people we were taught to believe didn't really exist in any meaningful way. I have to ask you about structure, because this book is structured so beautifully. There were literally moments when I put the book down and said, how did she do that? I had to figure out how she did that. So I can do that too. Halfway through the book, one of the characters, Marilyn, tells her story first person. And then you have one dead woman, I don't want to give anything away, narrates a chapter. At first I thought, that's incredible. That's exactly, not only was it exactly the right thing to do, but they were in exactly the right place. So I wanted to know, how did you know that you needed to do that? And how did you know where to put those two chapters? Because you portion out information that we need, almost like scattering seeds. And so by the time we get towards the end of the novel, all those seeds start to bear fruit. And then we can remember, oh, yeah, that happened. I know that back there. And it was just genius, I thought. So did you plan all this, or did it sort of just happen and then you noticed it and you strengthened it? How do you structure your books?
God, I don't know. Is that a terrible answer? I feel like it's
no. It's an answer I would expect, but I
really, it's like I feel like it's sort of like giving birth, that you block out the process of what it was to write the novel. When you finally have this beautiful, adorable little product in your hand, you're like, okay, that was pretty easy, but like it was actually a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But it's just,
Right.
well, I don't really remember. I think, I think I understood how it really has to be like there's this sort of thing of, okay, how much does Jane know? How much does the reader know? When
Right.
does Jane find things out? When does the reader find things out? And it's generally fairly close together, I guess, if that makes sense. But and I think, I had to sort of establish the present day characters, the woman who's bought the house, what she's done to the house before being able to go back. And that's part of what's cool about an old house is like these little treasures that remain. Even if you've taken everything out of it, there's still aspects of it that can reappear in a story in the next generation.
Yeah, that generational connection was so powerful. I'm going to ask you another question and take some questions from the audience. I wanted to know, I actually truthfully felt changed reading this book.
Wow.
I mean, it was an emotional experience. It was also an intellectual experience because I really felt, I started to think about other things more deeply and about history more deeply. And plus, it was such an emotional experience, which I love. I want books to make me feel like nothing is the same in my life. So I want to know, were you changed writing this book yourself?
I was. I think I
Oh,
was.
good.
Yeah. I think I was because especially I think the sort of indigenous piece of the book, because that was something where I was very, very fortunate to work with Donna Loring, who is a Penobscot tribal elder. This book is dedicated in part to her. And I worked with another sort of historical consultant who I feel like she challenged me in these really interesting ways that made me think things through. For example, I'll give you a very,
Oh, good. I love examples.
she, at one point in the book, I had seen this documented in a documentary, the process of how Native people would strip the bark from a birch tree in one piece and how they knew how to do that to turn it into a canoe. And so I saw it in a movie. I put it in the book. And this reader told me that is not your information to share. And there is a lot in Native culture about writing things down, the power that it has, and that not every story is everyone's to tell, and that some things shouldn't even really be repeated because for spiritual reasons. And so that was just like a fascinating learning process. And I think, my first reaction was, but I saw it in a movie, so it's out there. I'm not exposing it. But then you just have to listen, like,
You have to listen. Yeah.
do it, take it out.
That's That's so interesting. You have a lot of comments as well as questions. You have a couple from Mighty Blaze's best friend, Anissa Joy Armstrong, best friend of all writers and readers. She said, love this book so much. Which character, here, let me put it up. Which character, come on, show. Which character changed the most from the first draft to the final draft and why?
Ooh, what a great question.
Yeah.
Definitely Jane. Everyone else sort of, it was a weird sort of woo-woo spiritualist thing where everyone kind of came to me like almost fully formed. It's very odd, but they were who they were. It was kind of a struggle because I don't know why. I've done this before. In the first couple drafts, she was sort of, I don't know, whiny, complainy. She was just not.
Oh, really? Okay.
And she came, I had to improve her. I wasn't giving enough of the, what do we actually like about this character? Why do we actually want to spend time with this character? I think a lot of the time it's, I've had this happen to me twice where it's like, just give them a really good friend, and if someone loves this person enough to be their best friend, there must be something about
Right. That's right.
from there build. I think I really needed to kind of go back to Jane and figure out what was her story with David, how had they once been happy and now we're not, what were the impediments to that, and then just figuring out for her what's a conclusion for this character that is, on the one hand, not horrible, a happy-ish ending, but also not perfect, because she's made a lot of mistakes and she can't just wipe the slate clean.
Right. Well, that figures with, all the things that are passed down from generation to generation. And maybe you don't want to wipe them all clean.
Right.
You need to, it's kind of like, when they say, oh, forgive and forget. Well, you can forgive, but you probably shouldn't forget. You need to sort of live around that. You have another question? Let's see. Let me show this. Okay. This is from Katie. Did you see yourself in any of the characters?
Oh, okay. So I think a little bit in Jane, just as far as, I see a little bit of what she does with unearthing these stories as similar to what I am interested in as a novelist, and also her being a drunk. Those two things were very much me. But then also Marilyn surprised me.
Right.
She has this little girl, and the way she's really this bohemian artist in the 50s and 60s, and the way she's raising her daughter was very much the way we were raising our kids during the early days of COVID when I wrote her, which was, they were basically like feral creatures just running around.
Right.
No, they hadn't had their hair brushed in a week and it didn't matter. And they were just sort of like, but they were also having a blast. And just that sort of, when I started writing the book, my kids were babies, and I kept encountering young women who were writers, who said they didn't want to have kids, or they were afraid to have kids because they were under the impression you cannot be an artist and a mother at the same time.
Oh, yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Exactly.
Yes, you can.
So I thought, Marilyn, you so can, right? And this is part of this idea of women are such a product, everyone is such a product of the time in which they're born. And, we often think of sort of self-determination being the guide in everyone's lives, but it's really partly about when you were born,
Right.
Even at a very granular level, like in my last book, Friends and Strangers, I was thinking about, it was literally the case that if you graduated from college in 2008, you were never going to get to the same place in a job or financially as someone who graduated in 2003, just because of the way the job market was, the economy was, whatever. That's crazy. It's so specific. And so the same, I think, with Marilyn, she is so ahead of her time. She is a famous painter, and it's the 50s and 60s, and she's wrestling with this notion of being an artist and being a mother at the same time, and being, I think I'm probably the same way. She's a mother who's absolutely overflowing with love for her children or her child. But she's also like, I don't even want to brush my own teeth, let alone make you brush your teeth twice a day. The nitty-gritty of details and the forms, like that stuff is just, to me, the kryptonite. I hate it. Of course you have to do it. But
no, I never liked that argument. I always found that having a child actually deepened all the art and made things like so much richer and better. And not to disparage anybody who does not want to have kids, that's fine. This was just my personal experience. Okay, we have time for one last question.
Creativity that having a kid around you.
Yes.
I so agree with you.
And also it pulls you back to when you were young. The most fun days were acting totally goofy with my son and making up songs, and just unbelievably wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, here is one question from Lanisa again. How has your experience differed with being a Read with Janet pick and a Reese pick? And congratulations on being picked by 2 different major book clubs. Yes,
thank
congratulations.
You. What a nice question. Thank you. So both have been wonderful. I'm super thrilled to have chosen, because it's such I feel like we're living in, a time when truth is stranger than fiction. And so fiction is tough. It's tough to get anyone to sit down and read a novel. And so I'm just very happy to have it sort of amplified by these book clubs. The Reese pick is so new. So I don't know exactly what that's going to feel like, but the Read with Jenna, I have to say, something about the author she picks, they're so lovely. And every year on her anniversary of her book club, she has us all come on, and we're all standing in the, out on the plaza, and it's very early and usually kind of cold. And everyone is so nice. It's like we
That's
all
so wonderful.
so I'm very happy to be part of that community, because it really is a community, and it's just so lovely. And I love all the books she picks too, which is nice.
Yeah, it is all about community. Okay, we have one last question, and then that's it. Tori Whitaker wants to know, do you cry when writing scenes? Cry every time you revisit them? A great question.
Oh, it's such a good question. Do you, Caroline? Do you cry when writing scenes?
Yeah, sometimes I get really anxious.
I don't think I've ever cried writing a scene. I just but I do sometimes feel like the heaviness of something,
Yeah.
I didn't feel that as much with this book, maybe because my kids are so little and I have no time to process any emotions or thoughts. But I remember when I was writing Saints for All Occasions, I felt like, woof, this is, I don't want to carry this around into my regular life all the time. It's hard. So I definitely feel the like emotional hangover, but I don't cry. But I'm not really much of a crier either.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
So I want to tell everybody out there, I just want to remind you, patronize your local indie bookstore. It's good for the community. It's great for you. It's a wonderful thing. We put bookshop.org, just a click link for you, so you can go right to Courtney's books, and you can find other authors there too if you want. This particular interview is going to live forever on our YouTube station, so you can tell other people about it and watch it. And it's going to be a podcast in a few months as well, so you can listen to that. So I want to thank everybody for coming here, for your great questions, and I want to totally thank you, Courtney. This was just absolutely wonderful. So I'll see all of you next week, I think. I'll have to check my schedule. And Courtney, don't go away. See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for coming.